bow to you and invite you to bring Buddha nature to the forefront of your attention. Today I want to talk about an interesting topic called the end of manipulation. It's a little bit of an advanced topic, but I think it's a good one for everyone to hear, even if you're brand new to the path. Because the spiritual study in this world has been fraught with manipulation. If we look at many of the organized religions, they started off with this beautiful idea, communion with the divine, the awakening of Buddha nature, all this beautiful idea. But as humans, we want to feel safe. So we want to control everything. We want to put everything in a certain order so that we feel comfortable. And even our own path, this pathway of Trikaya Buddhism, there can be some confusion because we grew out of the different yogic paths. There's 4 principal yogic paths. So we have the bhakti yoga, the yoga of love, where we just full surrender to the divine. Say, I don't know what's right or wrong, just act through me, just do it. And we have the opposite spectrum, the yoga of mysticism. That is all about power and intent and making very conscious choices in order to set our lives up in such a way that it supports our practice. So there's a lot of moving pieces where we're actively controlling things. And we have jnana yoga, which tells us there's no difference. It's all divine. There's no you, there's no me, there's just light. And then we have karma yoga, which tells us just do your job, don't worry about it. Very simple. Just do your work. All is good. So we have these different, seemingly different viewpoints informing our practice. So part of what we need to do on this path of Trikaya Buddhism is reconcile these seemingly opposites. Like, do I try to control my environment and myself, or do I surrender to divine? Do I just put my head down and do the work in front of me and don't question anything? Do I just observe without judgment, recognizing that none of this is real in the sense that it lasts, that it's all illusion, just temporarily arising and disappearing back into the void? The way we handle all this is our very basic practice of just paying attention, watching our mind without judgment, seeing what it's doing. And when we do this, we start to recognize these patterns of manipulation. We start to recognize that sometimes we truly are in tune with the divine. We feel that yesness just pouring through us, and there's no thought about what needs to be done, what should we do, what shouldn't we do. We just know. And there's this intense faith, where faith means certainty and ability. We just know, we're certain, like, this is what I need to be doing right now. And that's a wonderful place to be. That is what we try to cultivate through all of our different practices of meditation, of mindfulness, contemplation. Because when we're there, all we have to do is just keep doing our practice of paying attention, of noticing that yesness. And then when that yesness is gone, we notice and say, oh, something shifted. What's going on? What do I need to do? Let me stop for a moment, maybe meditate, maybe push my mind into bright, happy mind states because maybe I got knocked out. And then once I'm in this higher mind state, I can look back and say, oh, what knocked me out of that yesness? And then you start to recognize, oh, it's because I got upset over the situation. And then our memory comes in, and I say, oh, I remember getting upset about the same situation, 6 months ago, and it also upset me and also knocked me out. So now we've entered into contemplation where we can actually ask, what's the underlying pattern? What's the hook of attachment that keeps pulling me in? But our minds are tricky and very powerful. So instead of doing this very simple practice that I just described, what most people do is they enter into this state of manipulation, where we try to manipulate ourselves into believing something, and we try to manipulate our environment to support that false belief. We'll try to manipulate other people because we like company. Like, buy into my story, tell me I'm right, even though it's not making us happy, even though it's creating suffering. It feels safe, it feels comfortable, even though it's uncomfortable. So in order to end this manipulation, in order to reconcile these seeming opposites on the path, is we have to be intensely honest with ourselves. Now, we don't have to go on the sidewalk and start shouting all of our secrets to the world. We don't have to go online on social media and start confessing every dark thought we have. But we do have to be willing to admit it to ourselves, to recognize that, number one, I've lost that yesness. I'm lost. I'm unsure of what to do. I'm confused. I'm struggling. I'm suffering. And to fully own that and accept it and just realize that, oh, yes, this is happening, without freaking out. Because the freaking out happens where now we're flailing, and what do we do when we flail? Is we immediately revert to the sense of manipulation, because that's what we've been conditioned to do. It's not anyone's fault, because that's just another manipulation, right? As we start to figure out, like, oh, well, these people that raised me, they trained me to behave this way, so it's their fault. It's like, well, what does that serve? How does that help you in any way? Laying blame very rarely helps. Instead, if we take that personal responsibility and notice, okay, I'm flailing. I know this sensation of flailing. Okay, next comes the manipulation. What am I going to try and manipulate? Am I going to try to push my energy into the room to change how it feels, to make myself more comfortable, and burn up a lot of energy in the process? Am I going to try to change this person's opinion of me that I perceive, which might not even actually be their opinion of me? That's where it gets tricky with relationships, because we're all looking at each other through different filters. So what we think somebody thinks of us is just that. It's just our perception of what we think somebody else thinks. And it might not be accurate in the least bit. Or are we going to try to fool ourselves and say, oh no, I'm not confused, I'm not suffering, just completely bypass, just paint a smile on your face and pretend everything's okay. And then you just get thinner and thinner and thinner and stretch tighter and tighter until you drop a fork and then you explode. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid, oh my god. And we beat ourselves up just because our muscle tension had grown so tight that we couldn't hold on to it. Or maybe there's something else entirely going on. We'll only know if we actually pay attention. If we stop trying to manipulate. And this can be tricky because, like I said, we're conditioned to always be trying to control, manipulate. And in the beginning parts of practice, it is all about control. We're learning to control our mind because we've been conditioned to just let it run in certain patterns over and over and over again that often cause suffering. So now we're going in very surgically and looking at these patterns and finding the decision point of, do I want to go through this loop again, or am I going to redirect my attention and try something new, something different that might feel uncomfortable, but if I have the courage, I can let it play out and see what happens. So, like I said, it's complicated. These reconciling the opposites. We pay attention. We learn to be fully present and just let everything unfold. And if we can do that with perfect trust, then we just continue. But to gain that perfect trust takes work. That's the training that we go through. That's the process, in the very, very basic mindfulness practice of noticing that, oh, I'm in a dark place. I'm in a mind state that's very heavy and oppressive, and maybe it's coloring my world, and I'm just seeing anger, I'm seeing sorrow. Maybe I'm just stuck on the couch watching Netflix over and over again. And we notice, and that's an opening. Just that noticing is huge, and it should be celebrated. Say, yes, I'm aware of my misery. How exciting. And that adds a little humor, because humor is so important on the path. And in that moment of awareness, we can start to train the mind. We use beauty and gratitude. So we consciously focus on beauty, we consciously focus on gratitude, and we keep paying attention. And what happens naturally, now this is important to notice, at first, we just do it because it's like, oh, that sounds like an interesting idea, I'm going to do it. And then we can get a little confused and start to think that we're making something happen. But really, we're not. If we just pay attention, we notice that just by placing our attention on beauty or gratitude, just the gratitude that we're breathing, even if it's labored, it's like, oh, I'm still taking a breath in. So thankful. Naturally, not by our own doing, but just naturally, our mind shifts. This is just how the world works. It happens. And the more we do that, the more we trust in that process. We notice a beautiful color. We say, oh, I love that emerald green. That's just so beautiful. with the gold threads that go through it. Such a beautiful combination. And we immerse ourselves, our mind, our attention into that beauty. And all by itself, the mind shifts. So we do this as training, not so we can make things happen. You know, sometimes it's sold that way. I know, like, I used to sell it that way. Like, you're all powerful, you can just make your mind do anything. And it's true, you can. We're very, very powerful beings. We can influence much of the world, but it doesn't make us happy. It doesn't make us free. But if we learn how these systems of the relative world work, we can start to use them to support our practice, and it can eventually lead us to the remembrance of what we actually are. So in the beginning, we're just, like I said, learning to control the focus of our attention. That's the only place we have control. I'm very upfront with you. You know, this whole world, this whole universe, this entire existence of reality is this magical, magnificent machine that's just unfolding, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. And the key to experiencing what you want to experience is in where you place your attention. Now it can get tricky because as we start to play with this, there's this whole issue of influence. Within this giant machine, there's tolerance levels where there's some wiggle room. So if you're driving down a road, for example, if it's a wide road, there's some wiggle room. So if you kind of steering wheel sways a little bit, maybe there is something in the road, you can swerve around it, and there's no problem because there's enough wiggle room. You're still going on that road. So in some parts of this grand machine, if you will, there's a lot of wiggle room. We can swerve this way, we can swerve that way, and still remain on the road. We can still keep our attention focused on what we wish to experience, or if we just wish to know truth. We can keep our attention focused on that, and there's all this room to swerve and move around. Other times, other parts of the machine, if you will, the tolerance levels are very, very narrow. So we have to pay really close attention to how we are directing our attention, or else we'll wind up on a completely different track. That's where the path gets complicated. Because in discovering this and learning this, there are all these side quests that we can take on the road to truth. And then once we start to go off on these side quests, we discover the ability to influence our life and how we experience life and how we can alter our perception and how we can change the world. Very lofty goal, change the world. And it happens, it's true. It works. I think the transcendental meditation people actually did experiments in the 70s where they sent a whole bunch of people to go meditate in a city where the crime rate was really, really high. So they said, all right, we're going to do something about this. So they took their top meditators and sent them to live there for months. And the instruction was just meditate and push out as high, bright energy as you possibly can. There was no physical involvement with any of the people. It was just go there, live your life, be bright, meditate. The crime rate went down. So it has a very tangible impact, which is beautiful and wonderful. Does that lead to truth? Does that lead to awakening? No. It doesn't. It's a side quest. Sometimes that's your Dharma, that is your truth that you need to follow. You need to go on that side quest and fulfill that loop before you can get any further on the path. Because there's a part of you that needs to experience that has that deep attachment to manipulating the world. So I need to know how this works. I need to be able to do it. And so we have to go and do it. But we can get caught in that sense of manipulating, that sense of control. So I just wanted to share this with you today so you're aware of it, so you know what your choices are. And if you truly wish to awaken, the caveat is that you have to end the manipulation. You have to be willing to let that go. Like I said, the tolerances get tighter and tighter at certain points where, oh, what if I just change this one little thing? Just put my attention over here to kind of tweak it. And then now your attention's over there. You're no longer on that original path. Now you're over here. And you've gone into this cycle. And again, it's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just what happens. And sometimes it happens in very large scale ways that becomes very tragic. Like we see that in some organized religions. They've completely forgot about truth. They're no longer teaching truth. They're teaching how to sustain their organization. And if you dig deep into their teachings, into their core, then you can find the pathway. It's still there. But it's very tricky. Because this tendency to manipulate, as I said, is conditioned into all of us. And it's very, very tempting. So as we pay attention, as we practice our path of Trikaya Buddhism, that is informed by all of these mystery traditions, all of these ancient wisdom that has been handed down for generations and centuries. We need to reconcile these different approaches and trust ourselves to know which approach works for which situation. And be honest about it. Because sometimes there are moments where there's truly nothing to be done. And that's surrender, that's bhakti, that's where we just focus all of our love and compassion and we offer it to ourselves and to the entire world. And we say to ourselves, to the divine, I do not know right from wrong, just act through me and do what needs to be done. And we trust that pull, that movement that starts to flow through us. And other times, we have to do our work. We have to figure out what is our work that needs to be done. Maybe we're caught in inertia and we're just on the TV, watching videos, either on Netflix or on TV or on our social media, scrolling, doom scrolling. And we're just stuck in that loop. And the back of our mind, we know there's some task that needs to be done. And so we have to rally our strength and go do the task. Do the karma yoga. We don't concern ourselves with how it might turn out, but we give our absolute best and our full attention to that task. Other times we need to strategically look at how our energy is being deployed and make some intent of how we're going to focus on the different aspects of our life. That's mysticism. Pull that in. And sometimes we just have to contemplate what is really going on here. There's a part of us that needs to be able to see clearly what's happening before we can actually embrace our situation. That's the tricky part of the path. That's where teachers and sangha and spiritual friends can be so helpful, and journaling. We can be honest with ourselves and figure out, well, what is it that has tripped me up? Where is the yesness? Where do I find my way back to this flow of the divine, where I'm just headed towards truth, where I'm imbued with light and just living and shining in this world. So, pay attention. That's my teaching in 2 words. Pay attention and be honest about it. Thank you.